Dr Annette Holian, thank you for being with us this morning. Let's start with the basics. What inspired you to become a doctor?
A doctor because I have a book I read in primary school called Hill End by Ivan Southall. It was about a group of children who became isolated, and one of the surviving boys desperately wanted to look after an injured child, and vowed he'd be a doctor. And I I took that on myself at the same time, and it stayed with me forever.
And so you wanted to help others. That sounds a fantastic reason for wanting to join the medical profession. What then prompted you to take the path of being a surgeon? Was there a path that you saw that you could take, or did you need to forge your own path?
The path in orthopaedic surgery was new, but in surgery, it was orthopaedic surgery. As an intern, we all have to work in an emergency department, and usually the next couple of years after that. And I really liked the opportunity and the immediacy of being able to, if someone came in with a broken wrist, that you could straighten it, put their plaster on and help them get out the door and back to their lives again. So really it was about restoring people's mobility and setting them on a path to recovery.
And when you decided to move into orthopedics, how did you find that as a woman in what would have been back then a pretty male-dominated field?
Yes, it was totally male-dominated. In fact, we hadn't had any women through the Australian training program. There'd been a couple of women who did orthopaedics, who'd had some training overseas, but there wasn't actually, as I discovered, any women doing orthopaedics in Australia. There was a woman in Adelaide, and I were the first two to go through the training program, starting in 1986. And I think it was, whilst we were very welcomed by many men, there were others who were very challenged by the idea of a woman doing orthopaedic surgery.
So if there was no sort of pathway and you had to forge your own way, can you talk to us about what sort of mindset and helped you forge your own path when there wasn't a clear-cut path to becoming an orthopaedic surgeon for a woman?
Well, regrettably, I think I tried to just fly below the radar and fit in with the men. And I found that really difficult because particularly when I'd finished, my mode of practice as a parent, and I was still the main carer. My then partner was very helpful with the children, but I have got 3 children, and trying to look after them and do work, the 110% to put into surgery, just didn't work for me. It wasn't what I wanted. The private practice was very challenging for me. And so I narrowed myself down to parenthood and public practice, and the many other things I took in to fill up those spare hours beyond that.
So what did you do to fill up those spare hours? What were the other things that you took on?
I started looking after children at Monash who had been brought down from Papua New Guinea, and then I started visiting PNG to provide surgical care up there with working with a surgeon at Bonomo and Wewak. And I did that for 2 weeks every 6 months, and I found that incredibly rewarding. And in 1998, I'd been going for a couple of years. There was a tsunami on the north coast at Itapi in July of 1998, and I managed to take my team from Monash up, but under the Defence umbrella. I wasn't with Defence then. And then it was just very difficult. And a year later, I joined Defence Force. So I've been working with the Air Force also for the last 20 years.
So what encouraged you to take that step to go to first PNG and then the other places you've visited, like Timor and then Afghanistan?
The PNG, well, they're probably 2 separate things. PNG was about me volunteering as a civilian to go and do something right out on the edge. I was encouraged by one of my mentors, Elizabeth Lewis, who was a neurosurgeon in charge of children's services at Monash at the time. She was well, in fact, she was telling me about the children with deformities up there, and then my then partner sort of kicked me under the tables, and she wants to know if you'll go with her. I just missed the cues, but I did start going with her and seeing the children. There was a lot of children who'd had bad, untreated injuries, and there was kids with polio and a lot of other conditions that we just don't normally see in Australia.
So you mentioned having a mentor. How important was that for you to have a mentor, and would you recommend that all young doctors have a mentor?
Yes, a number of mentors, a whole board of directors for many different reasons, because I don't think probably one mentor doesn't complete all the needs that you have as you go through. There are different aspects to practicing that you need help with, and it might be around your childcare and your busy practice, or it might be around your disappointment about not getting into a job at a certain place, or what it might be like working with defences. I find there's been a lot of different people over time who've helped me think about things differently, particularly when I've got one set way of thinking and I need to shift my thinking.
Let's stick with your overseas experience for a moment. So you assisted in the Boxing Day tsunami, and you were also there when the Sea King helicopter crashed. We've had some medical staff on board. How do you prepare for something like that?
The tsunami, I think it was a lot about working in very austere places. So I had worked already in hospitals in PNG that might not have running water, or might not have power. It could be an overwhelming number of patients that we had to work out how we would triage and what we would do. And I had a fantastic team. We had just an extraordinary team that went away there. We didn't know each other pretty much at all. There was a few defence reservists that I did know, the anaesthetists, but otherwise we were all new to each other. And but it worked incredibly well, and that's a great surprise because usually I really focus on team and working together as a team before you go. But that was an incredible team that really helped each other get through that really dire circumstance. The helicopter crash, I think particularly I reflected on, who should go out I was asked to go out to the, on the shore party to recover our members that we'd lost. And I was thinking, well, I've done the burns from Bali. We'd had about 5 at the Alfred who'd had really big burns. So I'd had that experience. I was working as a full-time trauma surgeon, so I was very familiar with trauma care. So I was functioning well on the ship, and I thought you couldn't be in a better place to go out to the scene and do what we needed to do. But I didn't have any victim identification training. It's like it's so rarely needed. I'm not sure it would really be just in time sort of training that one might need. So I think there was the austere work, there was the trauma work, there was the burns work I'd done, but nothing can really prepare you for being in a scene like that to recover the bodies of those that you know. What
impact did that situation and those situations you've described have on you, not only as a doctor but as a person? How did they change you, those experiences as a person?
As a person, it made me grateful for every day that I have. The loss of the people that day really brought home to us that it didn't matter what sort of work we were doing. Every day when you walk out the door, you might not come back. And so my experience from trauma working at the Alfred was, yes, that could happen to anyone in a car accident. And in a uniform, when we go off to war zones and work in Afghanistan, we half expect, they're not half expect, but it is a dangerous place. But this was a humanitarian mission and a warm day in a clear sky when we lost that helicopter and the people in it. And for all of us, it was like there, but for the grace of God, go I. We could have been on that flight. So when that trip ended, instead of coming back to Australia straight away, I joined my family who were on holiday in Vietnam. I hadn't been allowed to have work to go on that holiday with them. So in some ways that was good because I was able to do this response to the earthquake in Nias then. But I joined them, and it was actually really emotional because, again, it could have been me not coming back.
And you mentioned your family, and you've got 3 kids, did you say?
Yes, I have.
So tell us and talk to us about the challenges of managing having kids and also being able to have this amazing career that you've had and all the travel and work overseas that you've been able to do.
Well, I've had them at different times of a career. I had one child when I was still in medical school. My son was born at the end of 3rd year medicine. There was no way I could have had leave from my training program to have a child in my fellowship time. So my next child was born after I'd finished my orthopaedic surgery training. So there's 12 years in between them. And then I had some time practicing in a fellowship overseas, so another 4.5 years before my third child. So they were very spread out. It was a long time for parent-teacher interviews, I can tell you, most of my life, which was a very blessed time when the last one left high school. Largely supported, my partner was also a shift worker. He's a doctor as well and worked in an emergency department. So his work allowed us to work things in. And I had the support of my mother early on, particularly with my first child. We used to drop him off to her. She would look after him to the day while we're at university or in the early days at school. And I think only once did I have a nanny, but the rest of the time we managed.
What do you think your children have gained and gleaned from having an amazing role model like you as a mother?
I think they're very independent young women who can think and speak for themselves and speak up for other people as well. They have a very world view and are very aware of the privilege, I guess, that they were born into and the disadvantage that a lot of people in our community have, that, you know, just not born to that.
So you've talked about some of the amazing experiences you've had, and it's clear, well, it's coming through to me that you certainly have been passionate about everything you've done when it comes to medicine. How important is it for people working in health and doctors to find their passion and find that sense of purpose?
Well, I think it's very important. Trying to work without a sense of purpose or passion, I think, is very dispiriting. You know, if you just sort of force yourself out of bed every day to go to work to something you don't enjoy, that's pretty demoralizing. And one of the things I have learned over time is that you have to respect yourself to walk away from those. If it no longer serves you, respect yourself enough to walk away. That I've stayed too long in jobs where I thought, you know, if it didn't work, it must be my fault, and that's not true. Like, if you can't make it work, very often it's not your fault. There are a lot of other factors, and you just need to go and find something else that does fulfill that sense of purpose and passion.
Tell us about the coping mechanisms that you've developed over the years throughout the experiences that you've had. What's helped you get through the difficult times that you've had?
There's a few things. One of them's been journaling. I've been quite good at journaling intermittently over the years, and that was accelerated by a training program I did for Women in Leadership Australia. That rekindled my help with journaling. So it's not just a diary, it really is thoughts and feelings, and helps me sort out where I am. There's some visualization. One is about your ancestors or your aunties going into a challenging situation and surrounding you. I found that very helpful. Being infused with white light, if you're in real, as I stand there, you know, being attacked, being infused in white light. And on some days, like it used to be when I was going into a difficult workplace, but also at the crash scene at the helicopter, I have advice about wearing red underwear, that if you really need to be empowered, that's the day to wear your red underwear. I've adopted pink fluff. Actually, I haven't got my pink fluff today. I haven't needed it for a little while. But if you've got to be in a really dark place, wearing pink fluff to remind you that there's actually joy and humour to be found in the world is really helpful. And
it also sounds like, you know, we've seen photos of you when you were wearing, I think it was a tiara and, you know, the pink feather boa. How important is it, you know, to have that inject that humour and that sense of levity, because you are dealing with very stressful, traumatic situations? How does humour and that sense of fun help you? How did it help you get through those situations?
I think those visual signs like the tiara and pink fluff are actually to everybody else as well, because it's very easy to go into a downward spiral of unhappiness in bad places, particularly when things are going really, really wrong. And it's been particularly challenging. I think it's a message to the team that it's okay. I think that's much easier when you're the team leader to be displaying things like that. It might be pretty hard as the young one in the team, but I think it gives everybody permission for a little bit of lightheartedness and might be a pretty Australian approach. It was taco del mole by the Dutch, but it is a pretty Australian approach, I think, to use humour, not necessarily black humour either, but trying to find the joy. I've certainly been times in my life when it's felt like the joy's just been completely sucked out of it. You've got to actively go looking for what does bring you joy, and the pink fluff is a reminder of that. Things like the tiara, and thank you, Lulu, for the tiara. I've got one of the nurses posted that to me when I was in the Middle East. Yeah.
You mentioned being a team leader. What prompted you to, and you've taken on a number of leadership roles in different organisations recently. What prompted you to take on those leadership roles?
Probably about giving a female voice up into the upper echelons of our College of Surgeons as well as the Orthopaedic Association. I think I do bring something quite different to a lot of my male peers who've had a very different path. And I think our organisations just benefit so greatly from getting a diversity of thought to come into the decision making. It's perhaps have a little bit of lip service for us in the past, and we have been very male dominated organisations, but there's been a real shift in the last probably 3 to 5 years.
So one of the things that people are becoming more conscious of is, particularly, say for example, in conferences, that there'll be a whole discussion panel and it'll be all men, and now they call them manels, actually, not panels. So but one of the things is getting women to put their hand up to say, I'm happy to talk at that conference, I'm happy to be on that panel. What would you say to women and doctors who might be watching or listening to say the importance of being able to, putting up your hand and volunteering for those things, having the confidence to put yourself, as Sheryl Sandberg talks about, have a seat at the table and leaning in?
Well, it is important, but I think oftentimes women don't think that their voice is as important or as valued to take to that table. But then really, if people are not hearing it, they don't understand the other perspective. We bring a different lens. I've tried to take the approach that when we're organising meetings, that we've brought in gender policies at both those two major colleges, gender policies, and we have set targets for women's participation, and we're desperately trying to bring that into our conferences and events as well. And there is a shift, but you still can end up, particularly if you haven't got the men and the women, because I don't think one woman on an organising panel will bring change. It shouldn't be up to one woman on an organising panel. It's up to everyone to bring change. And instead of tapping men on the shoulder that they know because they share the rooms or they, have seen the work that they do, they have to actively think about what women, because there will always be women in every specialty that could speak.
So, Annette, we've only got a couple of minutes left. So I just wanted to ask you, if you had one piece of advice or one or two pieces of advice for the doctors who are watching this, what would it be?
I would say it would be about stretching themselves. They're not just taking the safe path. There are people who do just want safety and normality and know what's going to happen every day. But if people are looking to really know who they are, they really need to stretch their envelope to try new things, not to be afraid of failure, because unless you've failed, you haven't really tried hard enough or tried enough things. But to keep extending themselves and reaching out in different directions to see what they've got and what they can contribute.
Wow, that's fantastic. Look, thank you so much for your time today and all your knowledge and expertise. We really appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Sophie.